Hey, welcome back to the X podcast. We're at the long table.
The long table.
The long table.
Is that the new name?
You know, we'll just deputinize the table. And here with Mr. Tim Moore, here with Zachary Brown, freshly shaven, looking
Zachary
good.
Clean Face Brown.
Zachary
Yeah.
Clean Face
Maybe I
Brown.
should name my next D&D character that.
Oh, probably not.
Man, that
Here-
went.
In here, I thought you were liberated from it.
Yeah.
You need more prayers.
Wow.
Okay.
That went nerdy fast. We
That went nerdy fast.
but we are here, and so much to talk about. The last few weeks, not just in church life. It's been a crazy few weeks for us as a church. We've been trying to get ahead in some of our podcasts. We've been stacking some conversations. There's been some fascinating conversations, but some I feel like we recorded 2 months ago, and then things keep happening in the world that demand just at least a conversation, not really an answer or some brilliant assessment, but just to let this table be an extension of the tables. People are already around talking about the things they're already talking about. And this past weekend was, really no other way to put it, a very historic weekend, a dark weekend. I had just flown back from Atlanta and was at a restaurant and pulled up an image, and it was of former President Donald Trump with blood on the side of his face and what looked like kind of an angry / painful look with a fist up. And it was actually someone posting on Instagram, "Pray for our president." So I was like, okay, what happened? Then I saw the blood. I assumed someone had, broken through a crowd, punched him, something. And then when I saw this was actually an assassination attempt, I did a little story post that I just felt a sadness over what all this would mean, and began reading up on it. And there's been, as always, so much conversation in different directions since then, and conspiracy theories all the way to blame pointing on both sides. But I think you talked about on Sunday, the biggest thing right up front is simply, and we want to say at this table, is a renunciation of any and all forms of violence. And just the sadness of the day. Our gratitude that the former president is okay. But I'm curious, maybe to kick it off, where so I feel like an Alan Jackson song for 9/11. Where were you when the world stopped turning? But what were you doing? How did you first see it? I'm curious if you first saw it like me on social media or actual news. What's the difference anymore? Neither. I'm surprised I didn't see it from you, News Ned, in a group text.
Actually, someone else in a group text with us sent it to us.
Really?
And it was pretty shocking. I think I was at a outing or a picnic or whatever it was when we got a text from the same person. Hunter, and he texted us and he said, how did he say
Who is
it?
this
He
person?
Hunter.
Hunter. Okay. Hunter, why did you not send this to me? Is it because I'm not in the sports Stevie Sammy group
That's
text?
actually our group called Sports Buddies. So
that
absolutely.
actually checks out.
Here's what his text was at 6:33 p.m.
Okay.
Trump just got shot.
Oh, wow.
At his rally.
He did not air bubble that one.
No
airbag around
and
that.
that left it was like, wait.
Is
And
he
so my
dead?
response was, no way. He got shot or shot at. Like, which I guess both were true. Didn't know. But that was all. And I was like, wait, is he dead? Is he that was it. So then after that, it was, a scouring.
I've heard of a clickbait news title. That's a clickbait text. I mean, wow. That's like when Michael Scott walks in about Meredith. He'd hit his car. He said Meredith got hit by a car. And the doctors did everything they could to save her life. And she will be just fine.
Yeah.
They're like, why would you phrase it that way? See, the office is funny.
Maybe because he hit the car. He hit her.
It's
That's
funny
why.
hearing it in your words, in your tone of voice.
So, anyways, we've already devolved into a lighthearted tone, but I am curious that your initial reactions.
You were at an outing. We had just gotten home from like a little picnic thing too, and we were setting up movie night for my kids. Actually, we were doing like an outdoor movie night with friends, and I'm there trying to set up a screen on my back deck, and like my mom's calling me, my dad's calling me. I mean, everyone just starts reacting. I got groups of friends texting me, and people thinking it was this or that. I remember thinking, how many more historical moments am I going to live through in my lifetime? I feel like we've already crossed a lot of them. More thoughts on that to come later. But then, second of all, just it was interesting immediately some of the initial reactions that they were coming. I remember being somewhat surprised because I actually had conservative friends questioning if this was real or if this was staged or what was happening. That was like the first initial reaction that it was the conservatives
Wouldn't you think that
who
would
were
come from a left-leaning side politically? Would go, this is staged, not from the conservative side. But again, maybe more conspiratorials live on the further right. I don't know.
That and the distrust of government and
distrust of government.
Well, I actually heard somebody that is again a conservative that would prefer Trump over Biden say, yeah, but it was just the way that it happened on stage, him coming right back up, fist pump. It just looked, and it was interesting. I heard somebody say, they're like, what's crazy is when you watch so many movies that you would have believed that moment if it was in Gladiator or The Patriot or Troy.
Right.
But when you see moments that rare and historic right in front of your eyes, it does say something about either, our numbness to cinema or our distrust of government, that our first thought is that can't be real.
The way it unfolded was theatrical.
It was.
For something as serious as this is. And I was kind of, when we got home and I flipped on the news, and I was kind of glued to the news. I mean, because we were gone away. And so I was like, they're showing video footage of it. And I expressed sentiments. I'm very grateful that he was okay, I'm also, I think it's really sad. And I think I understand why, but one of the more overlooked aspects of this is there was a guy there, an innocent person who lost their life.
Yes.
Protecting his wife and his daughter, I think,
Yes.
And so I feel like whenever it's talked about, that should be mentioned.
Our condolences go out to that family.
Yeah,
it's heartbreaking.
That's heartbreaking.
Corey
really,
Compton,
Yeah.
a firefighter.
Yeah,
seemed like a great guy, man of God, attended church.
Just a sad situation. I mean, again, grateful. I don't care who it would be. Any kind of rally, whether it would have been President Biden, I would have been just as grateful. Like, none of that changes. Like, to me, I think at first probably my thought was just shock, like, no way, and then there's later, I think we were texting, like, part of me, I think you even said this in a text, part of me is after kind of settling down, kind of investigating, what are the details, kind of made me think, I am honestly kind of surprised that something like this hasn't happened sooner with the climate we've been in for the last
8 years. 8 years.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not, I never wish it, but there's been a lot of,
this has felt like an unfortunate inevitability.
Yeah, it's been a lot of kind of like strong rhetoric and language throughout the political divide over the last 8 years that I think part of me always just kind of thought, man, one of these days somebody's gonna try to do something they're gonna think is heroic. What's crazy is when details as they're coming out and unfolding about this, there's still a lot of like, this is shocking. The guy, 20-year-old kid who does this, the fact that he was a registered Republican voter, at least at one point, don't know if it was,
He had recently registered as a Republican voter.
And gave some money to a left-leaning Democratic group, $15. Not much, like, it's almost like, then a lot of people saying that he was, again, like you often hear with guys who do these violent attacks, these mass shootings, which this qualifies for that. It's, 4 people have been shot. It's a mass shooting. And like, they often have the same kind of MO.
Yeah.
They were kind of alone a lot. They were bullied, just almost maybe never felt accepted. Like,
awkward.
Yeah, just a little bit socially awkward maybe. And
I don't know if you've seen the pictures of like what he looks like. He looks
young.
That's what, and just he looks like someone who could be alone. You hate to
And
make
bullied.
that assumption.
And he was bullied.
He
Yeah.
was bullied.
Yeah.
And then, you know, AR-15 is the other factor that is usually in these scenarios. That's a whole other conversation. But
although it's not the kind of okay, never mind. I probably shouldn't talk weapons. So it's probably not the weapon of choice I would use for trying to do a longer range shot.
yeah,
If you were trying to be specific.
Because I've heard different reports about this. Is 150 yards a long range shot for an AR-15?
Not necessarily. It's just AR-15s aren't usually the weapon you think of for long range shooting. They're not. That's
but I
why
have heard
that's
this
why the
distance
issue
would be in basic training, like would be a basic training
yeah,
target.
in basic training, he obviously wasn't in the military, hadn't gone.
Mm-hmm.
He was a gun enthusiast, so that we know. If he could have easily gone out and spent a lot of time shooting,
But you know what
that's
is
a way
interesting?
harder shot than people think if you are aiming for the head.
On kind of what you're saying about, you know, there's still a lot that's unknown about him. I thought Jon Stewart brought up an interesting point on the Daily Show last night. He talked about, he said, you know what is very telling about right now is he said, this shooter is not yet fitting into any of the categories that each side's bracing themselves for.
Mm-hmm.
They said if each side is honest, they brace themselves either for one of two scenarios, either a "see, I told you" demonization of the other side, or "oh, this is so sad, this is such an anomaly, and here are the special circumstances around it." And unfortunately, so to speak, air quotes, unfortunately, it's still up in the air. This guy is a registered Republican who has,
somebody died.
Yep. Voted. But, you know, recently I guess has leaned left, and there's just still so much up in the air. And it does go to just be telling kind of about the psyche of those of us maybe that find ourselves just polarized. That whenever these things happen, we're either looking at it to jump onto it to reinforce a narrative for or against.
The one common thread that does connect, and we can move on and talk more about the actual attempt and what it means, but amongst these types of shootings is young man a lot of times. And it's so what is it about these types of scenarios that it seems like young, I mean, I'm talking like below 25 young men find themselves in.
The frontal lobe isn't even fully developed.
I know. It's crazy to me that the amount of shootings and things we have that involve. How do you have to look at that from just an objective standpoint and say there's an issue in this country, and we have to do something to address that. That's a topic for another day, though, not today.
Yeah. Well, there's also what's also kind of been shocking is watching stuff unfold. There's been variety of things so again, I think a lot of us probably initial was shock.
Yep.
I did feel a real sense of sadness, obviously for the people that were there, grateful to see, and kind of like I don't want to say, I don't know if inspires the word, but watching the Secret Service pile on, and then I don't believe they moved. A lot of people are like, why did they take so long to get them out? Well, first of all, I don't think I would move somebody if there's a threat of sniper or fire. You're going to stay over them until the threat is neutralized, which is what they did, right? And then you never know if there's somebody else later, you know what I mean? But they do. And so watching them when they get them up, right? Have you seen the footage and they stand up and, you know, obviously you could tell, and I think Donald Trump had enough time to kind of realize, okay, I think I'm okay, you know, because he first thing he does get up is, hey, my shoe. You know, they knocked off their tackled him and knocked his shoe off of him or whatever, you know, and just seeing all of them, I can't get the visual. All of them putting their hands up, trying to shield his head, like, you know what I mean? Like I thought the bravery and just kind of like the Secret Service people knowing this is what I'm called to do, which is to stand in front and take a bullet for him.
Yeah.
That was pretty crazy.
I do. For me, though, I just have to say what stood out. I think the image that's going to be remembered forever.
Oh, yeah.
Was Donald Trump in that
when
moment.
he stopped and he said, fight.
I mean, I think the uncomfortable, I mean, me and Pastor Zach, we were listening to something yesterday, just kind of talking about love him or hate him. That is going to be an eternally historic moment for our nation. And it is uncomfortable. It probably, if you do not like Donald Trump, to say the obvious thing about that moment, which is that is a pretty a BA moment, a pretty kind of just iconic, rocky, and you know,
kind of
look,
an impressive moment.
it
He
is.
paused to
And if you listen
get
to
his
this
Photoshop
podcast for a long
shot.
time, we try to talk on both sides and acknowledge both sides, and I've made pretty clear some of my disdain for it when it comes to the way the former president has spoken to people and certain things, but I have to say that moment is it does something
kind
in
of
you.
endearing.
There's something in that moment that you're like, look, love or hate the man and his character in other areas. The fact that his immediate reaction was to stand back up in defiance.
Yeah.
And the strength of that moment. What was it? How Irwin said? He said, whatever you think about Irwin, that moment was not bigger than him.
Yeah.
And he rose into it.
Yes, he did.
And honest, and this is against the backdrop of the last couple weeks, creates an even stronger momentum to him.
Yes.
Then he walks into the Republican National Convention, and there's almost an emotional.
Yeah.
I actually watched a 5-minute thing from it of like when he came in the chat, and you know they were singing the USA song, and the crowd started chanting his words, fight.
Yeah.
And I watched him for one of the first times actually look like he was getting emotional, and
Well, I'm sure that moment affected him.
yeah,
I mean, when you realize, and I've heard his posts and stuff out there, and when he probably, I mean, you got to imagine, right? You're in a moment, you don't even know what's happening. You're just like, what just happened? I heard something, clipped his ear, and then he goes down, realizes it's shots, and goes down, and then all of that. You imagine the adrenaline. Like you would be on adrenaline for a day or two. It comes off of it, and that's when I think the realization also hit, because I've seen some of his comments where he was like, if I didn't have my head turned looking into that, I'm not here.
Yeah, it is crazy.
And so I think that is one of those things that you just realize I was 2 inches away from death.
And what to me was an incredible just kind of turn of fate of circumstances Zach has shared, he actually feels like that was Gabriel, the archangel, that somehow in that moment.
Okay.
Oh,
People
okay.
did not pick up on your
turn.
sarcasm in your
Oh.
humor.
No, I did not share that was the angel Gabriel that was
Oh my god.
that was doing that. But what I was gonna say though, I agree with your sentiments on the photo and what happens on there. Have you? I'm genuinely curious. Have either of you ever seen a man that is so good at casting a narrative or creating like this image about himself, the way he manipulates, the way people talk about him, what he does? I mean, it's unlike almost anything I've ever seen. Like the way he just like responded in that moment to in that fight line, and just the way he just, I don't know, just uses every opportunity to market himself and do all this. It's really been the story for the last 8 years of how he's risen to power in a political sense in this country and the impact he's had.
Well, my guess is, first, I don't think any of that was planned. So I think that was just an emotional response
No, I
to like,
understand
I'm
that,
still here and I'm standing.
But that's my
And
point.
so,
It's instinctual.
yeah, I
There's
think
some-
he's
there's
wired
some-
this way.
There's something,
I think he's wired this way.
but have you seen in your lifetime, can you think of anyone who has that instinct from a marketing, like reading the crowd, reading the room, sway the narrative, like that kind of ability that he has? Because it's honestly kind of mind-boggling.
I don't know. Probably. I think that no one's been on a stage like he has, or has been at the helm of such a polarizing time in our country since my life. So it's hard to compare that. I think there are other people that are probably have that kind of charisma and that kind of ability. I just don't know that we've ever seen anybody, at least not in the last, again, I don't know that we've seen anybody. The person politically that comes to my mind that I feel like would, not for all those things that you say, but I think kind of held in my lifetime that held that kind of swagger would have probably been Ronald Reagan.
I was gonna
And again,
ask,
I was younger then, but I remember it was kind of in my, so that was really like my growing up to like teens, but like there was almost this air of strength that I think Ronald Reagan kind of carried with himself. And I don't remember, again, the assassination attempt. I was young, very young when that happened. I don't even know the events of that really, but
Yeah, I think I know what you're getting at in terms of there's a showmanship to him. There's a bravado he puts on. There's a persona that he embraces. And I've seen moments where it feels extremely manufactured. There's the iconic and kind of infamous moment in 2020 where he kind of blazes through a crowd of protesters, then holds a Bible upside down. There's the almost comical moment where he had just gotten over COVID and he's standing outside and the helicopter spotlight comes on him and he does this dramatic ripping off of the COVID mask. But I actually felt like this moment was a just human response.
Yeah. I
actually felt like this moment was just his humanity. And I think I told you, I said, there are, and I do just have to say this, there are a lot of things that I really have a disdain when it comes to the actions and the words of the former president. But one of the things that he has, and I'm not saying it should always be like this, but he has a spirit of perseverance. He has a no quit in him that just, and almost, I don't know, again, I don't know where it being healthy or unhealthy starts and ends. Right. But there is something in him that is just like this feeling of I will not stop and I will not. And I just think you actually just saw the visceral instinct to that in that moment. The fight, the commander frequency kind of.
That's the kind of thing, though, that I think moments like that, those are kind of the things that I will say. I think part of me, and I think as Americans, really want out of our leaders.
Yep.
Not.
Yep.
I think that's the challenge that you have right now for all of that is like we want a leader who kind of looks like they have courage. We want a leader that looks like they, don't back down. I mean, especially when you think about where we are on a global stage right now.
Yeah, but see, I actually think that's the danger.
Well, there's always a danger in that
if
it's wielded wrong. But I think that's.
Yeah, because what you're just saying is I literally had it back and forth in my mind because my prayer and goal is Lord, let two just random, brand new, young, vibrant men and women come to the Republican and Democratic Party and let me vote on two different people this November. I don't think my wish is going to be granted.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah. No. So in lieu of that, I will say as I'm watching what's going on, there's part of me, again, that when I saw that, and then, after the dismal repercussions of the debate, and then this moment hits, and in the middle of a world where, we just foiled an Iranian plot, and you got China's aggression rising, you got Russia, Ukraine, that you're right. There's that side of me that I'm like, man,
that's my point, though, I think, is I feel like versus you also have on the news a week ago was President Biden going to a NATO event with Zelensky there and calling Zelensky Putin. And you're going,
I know. But I guess my point is,
embarrassed or nervous.
But I guess my point is my wrestling match is that side of me rises up, but then there's another side of me that understands the way I'm wired as a human being and also understands a little bit of human history to know, these are the moments that authoritarian kind of leaders rise up because it's in a climate of fear when someone who exhibits strength, because that's when authoritarian figures flourish. Again, whatever you think about Donald Trump, historically, when there is fear and there's lack, there's whatever, and somebody comes along with that kind of visceral strength, that's when the masses buy in. And so I have to look. I'm like, okay, what's the risk factor process of this? Because it's a whole other debate. But then I think I'm thinking about all these world powers, and I'm like, we need somebody with strength. But then I'm like, but one of those world powers I'm worried about is Russia. And I think I saw an article right now that said they are popping champagne in the Kremlin as we speak. After J.D. Vance and the second night of the Republican National Convention last night, and it's just a lot. There's a lot of process.
I don't understand why Russia would be so excited.
Are you kidding me? J.D. Vance and Trump are both like
they don't want to send aid.
No, they don't want to help. That's because of why.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because there's anti-Ukraine sentiment and pro-Russian sentiment.
I've heard more of the side which is Russia's really happy that Biden's in power.
Oh,
that
I'm
he doesn't have to
sure.
worry about any kind of
Oh, I'm sure.
response from America.
I'm sure.
That's why I'm saying the narrative has typically been Putin's quite glad for Biden to stay and to get reelected.
Oh.
You think that's a narrative?
I've absolutely heard that narrative.
I do not. I've not heard that narrative, and I don't.
Well, you got former President Trump at the debate basically all but said, if I were in office, Putin would have never done this. He knows he's not going to mess with this.
Well, of course he says that, but Putin also knows that if they have a face-to-face agreement, and there can be some flattery that President Trump will literally go against his own intelligence right in front of news cameras.
Well, I don't know.
Part of Putin's whole thing is he's upset because he feels like NATO has been increasingly aggressive, driven by American priorities, and encroaching towards more and more historic Russian territory. And I think President Biden has been very clear that if Putin were to ever strike a NATO country, that he would fully uphold Article 5 of NATO. Former President Trump has implied that if that were to happen, it's 50-50 if he would.
Yeah, he could pull out of NATO.
Yes,
and he's accused Ukraine of being just as corrupt as Russia, and basically said we shouldn't be there. And J.D. Vance, I mean, the comments I've seen have basically said, I don't care about Ukraine. We shouldn't be there. I mean, J.D. Vance is a starch isolationist. I mean, even more so than Trump. So, yeah, that's why I think we saw this news article saying the Kremlin's celebrating. I mean, because the sweeping momentum right now is moving towards.
I will say politically, I think the Republican Party has a whole lot of momentum from a failed assassination attempt, and how that, I want to just say, kind of like invokes a lot of energy, believe it or not. And you know what I mean? The side of and to what's on the other end, and Pelosi and everybody else calling for him to step down, and him refusing to step down. So it's right now. Right, we've sat at this table and go, who do you think's going to win? Like, if you were to ask me today, and then I think Trump's going to win the election.
There was an eerie, almost Messiah back from the dead feel when I watched the convention last night. I mean, it was all and even just, I don't know if you saw this, but there are certain people that were announcing, but then they did almost kind of like worship songs. Where it was almost like you'd see a worship leader and they're like, and God protected, and I mean there was that literal almost like aura in the room, and
it is interesting the cult of personality that still kind of exists around him. I mean, people in the room. He walks out with a bandage on his ear, and there's multiple delegates in the room that have the bandage in their ear, wearing it in support of him doing that.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm very serious.
A new trend of
and so to your point, going back to the point you were originally trying to make. It's because of the historicalness of the moment, it would be easy to get swept away by the image. That's probably just a very human response, just who he is, that he's projecting former President Trump. But you're saying there's a danger behind all of that.
Yeah, I see a danger on both sides. I see a danger in weakness, and I mean, just to be honest, President Biden, I don't think it's any longer debatable that he's not in full touch with his capacities.
Yeah. The word that I would use, and mean this in the most respectful way that I can. I'm not meaning this to be disparaging, but the word that comes to my mind if you were to ask me about President Biden is the word feeble.
Yeah, it's just
when
feeble.
I see him walk,
it's sad.
when I see him talk, when I see all of this, this is not what I think we as Americans are looking for, regardless of what side you're on.
Yeah,
I think even a lot of Democrats agree with that. This is not what we're looking for to lead our country.
And these are strong words for me to say because obviously I don't know the ins and outs, but it feels very selfish that he won't pull out. I'm going to be honest. It feels very selfish that he will not pull out. I mean, not only because of the state he seems to be in, that seems pretty obvious, but because of what the poll numbers are saying.
Well, the polls are starting to reveal that he's losing. They are.
It's not as. He's definitely losing. Depends on where you look. Some are up 6-8 points. Some are still within the margin of polling error. Excuse me. But Yeah, he's definitely.
He's not gaining any ground anywhere.
No, I don't.
He's
disagree.
losing ground
I don't
most
disagree.
places, and
the
This
calls from
past
his own
weekend-
party grow every day.
yes,
Yes.
they're
No, I don't
not quieting down. I think, if you ask me, I think he is going to step down.
I think he will too.
I think the pressure is going to mount so much.
I think it's inevitable unless the party disagrees. The Democratic Party disagrees that Trump is inevitable, and
Yeah.
it's not worth all the stress of switching someone out.
All right. Before we dare go down a different rabbit holes, because I think we wanted to come and talk about this moment and its implications.
Yeah.
And it's so easy. Just like I'm sure anybody else watching now, you get going on a conversation about latest events and you just start going down wherever. So I want to stay back on this event. And, one of the things that I was nervous about was, I think a lot of people were, is like escalation.
Mm-hmm.
I think, what are we, 4 days, 5 days from the time it happened today? I don't get the now. Again, that doesn't mean there couldn't be. I kind of get the sense that almost of sane, rational people on both sides. I feel like everybody, when that happened, it was a little bit of a, I want to say, a wake up call to both maybe Republicans and Democrats. I don't know. I'm curious your guys' thoughts on this because you guys might. It all depends on what sources and what you see and what's in your algorithm. But I almost feel like there was this collective we need to dial it down.
Yeah.
Initially.
Sorry, I'm just laughing because there was a guy that, I don't know if y'all saw this. There was one of the main Republican leaders that gave that kind of speech and was like, this is the time to dial back the rhetoric and lower the temperature and get rid of divisive language.
And then
he spoke. And then he spoke and literally just went for the freaking jugular at the convention. And later they interviewed about it. He goes, I apologize. They gave me the wrong
I heard that. I saw
teleprompter.
that. The wrong teleprompter. No, they didn't. You're such a liar.
And
It gave me the wrong teleprompter. Yeah, they did. The first part of it was correct. The second half, somehow it got swapped out.
Be like
Ron
me,
Burgundy.
be like me speaking on a Sunday thinking, what our people really need is a message of hope. And then I just get up and I'm like, next church, I just have to level with you. We're all going down.
Yeah.
The ship is sinking. And then later you're like, Russ, what's going on? Be like, they put the wrong
confidence notes up. And so I just kept going.
At
some point,
I'm so
wouldn't
sorry.
you realize and go, hey guys, this is the wrong one. I don't need those notes. I'm just going to speak from, you know what I mean? Like, and I thought, and to that point, and then I want to hear you say, I will say, of the previous, who knows how long, and the debate was one of the most embarrassing, probably political stage moments that we've had that I can think of in years. Maybe it's going back to January 6th. Like, this is probably one of the most embarrassing, when you think about it from a global perspective of what we're watching and what the rest of the world's watching, going, oh, scratching our head, please. But from that moment to this, I actually kind of walked away this weekend going, that was probably the best I've seen both candidates. I thought President Biden, the comments that he did make and the reaching out when a lot of people say they haven't talked in years, to at least just a phone call to say, how are you? Donald Trump said, fine, I'm fine. He said, well, I'm glad you're fine and that you are in Jill and I's prayers. And just the fact that there was some civility.
Oh, I didn't know that happened.
Yeah, he called him. And so the fact there was some civility there, and I thought the comments, again, both of them, all of them put their spin on it a little bit, but I thought both of them were like, I felt like even Biden called for it. This is not a time for violence. This is, and so if anybody you think would react to something like this, well, I guess it'd be probably the Republican side. But
yeah.
I just thought I came out of this from weekend kind of at least going. I thought they both handled as bad of a situation as well as they could have.
I thought so too until Joe Biden's interview with
that's
Lester Holt.
Yeah, I saw some of that too.
Yeah.
So I think that what I was going to say is whenever we have these types of events happen in culture, and I haven't been around for obviously all of our history, but this is 9/11, January 6th.
Not even close to
yeah,
it.
I mean,
I'm gonna move on from that.
Not even all of our history.
not quite
Not
all.
quite
of
all of it.
Yeah,
Look,
I've read about it.
I mean, I
It's all
remember
good.
George
Look.
Washington, but that was about it.
Look, look, you've been around for a couple hundred, but not the entire.
Anyways, moving on. Boy, if you're watching at home, you there is no room for error.
Yeah,
at this
you can't
table
mess
at
up
all.
like that. Sorry.
This table is unforgiving.
Yesterday, Hunter, you're gonna forgive me for this. Yesterday, your son-in-law, me and Pastor Jesse were talking about when we're gonna get together and kind of go over a message or whatever. And he goes, "Yeah, the day is pretty booked." He goes, "Honestly, the only time I'd probably have is afternoon, sometime before lunch." And and I was like,
Afternoon starts early when you got a long day.
and Pastor Jesse just bullied him after
Oh,
that.
yeah.
But anyways, it's only been a few hundred years, but from what you have seen,
Yeah, but he bullied him. All right. Yeah. So, what
Are
was
you
I
a
saying was-
victim?
maybe. So whenever these moments happen, it seems like everyone comes together, and I think that's what we
Right.
saw for 3 or 4 days. People came together, said the right things, did the right things, and I just think it's a matter of time.
Well, of course.
And you're
I mean,
you're already seeing with his
it's a political
interview.
year.
Yep, you're gonna see it. I guarantee you already see snippets of it coming out at the Republican National Convention. It won't be long before it's full scale. Everyone again. I was reading an interesting article just talking about the psychology of the shooters in moments like this, and there's really not much when you get to the extremes of both ends of the political spectrum. They say it doesn't take a lot psychologically to make the leap from what you're reading and consuming and all these things to then go and do action on it. See, I think we're so in the middle, even though all of our algorithms are probably a little different, but we mostly see stuff in the middle. But these people who are on the extreme ends, I don't think any of that has gone away. I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. And I think there's always going to be a danger for this type of stuff to happen. I don't think it's going to get toned down at all.
Yeah, I'm sure it's only toned down for a moment. What will be interesting and telling will be the speech that Donald Trump gives at the end of it. Because they always go on the last day. Nominee goes on the very last day.
Yeah.
So I think that will probably, it'll be interesting to see what tone he sets.
See, I don't even know if, I think that'll be interesting. I mean, I read an article or listened to an interview on someone saying that he actually has changed his speech because of this. So
That's why I'm saying I'm really curious to see how much it affected it.
But to me, I don't want to just see action right now. Can he sustain that tone through the end of the campaign?
I don't think any of them can, because when I recall the debate, they both started off, fairly civil, and then we're arguing about who can hit the longest drive.
Yeah, it did not take Joe Biden
I
long
just
to go from, hey, I hope you're okay, to almost verbally attacking Lester and saying, this is the guy that wanted a bloodbath, which, by the way, I will be the first to say my disdain for all of the divisive rhetoric of Trump, but that is actually a misquoted text from former President Trump. The whole bloodbath thing, President Trump was actually talking about the economic fallout of the automotive industry.
There's a lot of that.
So
let's be honest. There's
yes,
a lot
there
of that
is.
where stuff is pulled.
And so the part of me, if I'm in Biden's shoes, I understand his frustration if there does start to be what probably would be hypocritical language from the right of it's the divisiveness this causes. I'm like, okay, if you literally disregarded everything in 2020 and the setup of the election being stolen and the incitement of the insurrection and all this kind of
Did you
stuff.
say
I almost said resurrection. Insurrection. Listen,
Wow.
Listen,
We know who your God is.
Listen, Saturday there was a resurrection. So, but
Try to call 'em out.
if you do all that,
I
and then
appreciate
there's
that.
still like there's a turnaround, and you can't deny the divisiveness of the last 8 years as far as language, especially from that side. And so I think I understand the frustration if I'm in President Biden's shoes to begin to hear, well, it's a lot of the rhetoric when he's like, no, I've literally just been saying.
Yeah.
So I think there's probably a lot of on both sides of okay, what am I allowed to say? Can I point out?
But to my point, if he comes out with a speech that's more unifying or gentler and great. I hope he does. I hope he means it, and I hope he stays that way. It's not going to happen. I'm just
But we haven't heard anything like that in years. I think hearing one speech like that would be impressive to me. That's all I'm saying.
I know. Maybe I'm just cynical at this
Well,
point.
I think to an extent, right? There's a level of humanity that if someone took a shot at you in one rally, knowing you're going to campaign for the next 5 months, there's some aspect of you that's. I mean, I would just be, as a person, would just be nervous to go to the next rally. I know the Republican convention is indoors, probably a little bit easier to secure. They can do all this stuff. But the next outdoor rally that you have, if you're Donald Trump, are you not just like in the back of your mind going, I hope this is safe? Like,
No,
that would.
You know what I think his psychology is? I've always thought I was unstoppable. Now I know I'm unstoppable. I actually feel like that's how he feels.
Well,
But for him, if you're Team Trump or whatever, you kind of hope that he there almost gets a little bit more of like a humble confidence of like, okay, wow, like I got this momentum, this has happened, I'm just gonna kind of carry myself in and and not feel the need to attack or be petty
right.
But
well, we know that what we know is with the candidates we have now, what we're all hoping for will not happen, no matter what happens. But one of the things that I thought would be the one thing the one perspective that I was curious, and again, we're just kind of shooting at the hip here, just kind of like, what's our reaction? What do we envision, this doing? The one thing we've had some conversations about is, and I'm curious your guys' thoughts on this. There have been plenty of people that have come out in response, calling what happened on Saturday a divine act. That God was protecting Donald Trump. I have seen it I'm sure you guys have, on plenty of social media posts. And I think this is a conversation. I'm curious. I've got a lot of thoughts on this. They're just kind of raw. I haven't organized them. But I'm curious what you guys have seen in that regard that's out there. And just, I don't know, in a raw sense, how does that land with you?
Yeah, I can tell you the two extremes I've seen. I feel like is there's the extreme of, I'm just going to say it, horribly photoshopped Facebook memes of, I guess it's Michael the Archangel or Jesus with flowing hair, kind of superimposed behind President Trump, or it's Jesus, I don't know, protecting him in that moment, and it's just obvious and saying this is what God did. And I've seen the other side. What's the guy's name that wrote the Irresistible Revolution? Shane Claiborne did an article that got posted in one of the Christian, and literally the title of the article is "God Did Not Save Trump." And he argues from a theological standpoint that you should never say that, and that it's disrespectful to say that he saved Trump, but not the man who died and gave his life. Right. And so he's like, theologically, we know God did not save Trump. I find, to be honest, both of those frameworks a little too dogmatic. I think, I'm just gonna be honest. I personally feel like it's not only cheesy, but kind of a poor witness to just be, bombasting this whole like image of that is obvious Jesus, because I feel like it's against the backdrop of an already unhealthy, idolatrous kind of mix of politics and religion, and him being seen as like a divine anointed one. And so I just don't like or resonate with any of that culture or philosophy. At the same time, as I'm reading Shane Claiborne on the other side saying God did not save Trump, I'm like, you don't know that. You don't know that. And, playing devil's advocate, what if God, as tragic as it may sound and feel, if it's a loved one, theologically, you could obviously say God sovereignly decided it is time for me to take this man home. And this man's time has not come. Every single day, there are going to be some of us that leave this earth and some of us that don't. And, you can sort out your theology and how much you believe God's sovereignly involved in that.
Yeah.
But so I don't think either dogmatic position. I mean, not, and maybe this is the easy thing for me to say, but we don't know.
No, we don't.
Yeah. No, that's well said. I probably would echo a lot of your comments. I've seen those two extremes. I'm gonna throw a third extreme that I've seen in there. I saw someone post the other day a picture of Trump with like red coming out of the background, and it was the verse, and I saw the beast rise out of the sea, and the beast had a fatal wound on his head, and it was healed, and it was
Wow.
Oh, Revelation 13.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was like, okay,
Wow,
Trump
that is
Antichrist.
another. There is a triangle of dogmatic views that you can take on this now, not just two, not a fulcrum.
Wow. There's the triangle right
I guess
there.
I hadn't even thought about the Revelation 13
Yeah,
perspective.
it made me chuckle because we just came out of a series.
You did say it was kind of like a resurrection.
Yeah,
I mean,
there we go.
Yep. And the whole world was watching.
I think that the extremes are definitely probably an unhealthy place to live. I honestly found myself thinking about just some good friends, close relationships I have with people who are not Jesus followers, and I know because they've asked me before, do Christians really believe that he is like almost like the appointed divine leader? I'm like, yeah, they do, and why? Like he doesn't really.
I would say not all. Let's not cast all Christians in that. You're saying some. And what we see,
Some.
like there's definitely that
It
narrative.
seems to be the loudest.
But I mean, I don't think any of us at this table is what I'm saying.
No.
Agree with that narrative.
Correct. But that's the narrative. If you're wondering, okay, and I don't want to make assumptions about people you know, or if you interact with people who are Jesus followers or not. But in my interactions, in my friend circle with those who are not Christ followers, that's the loudest thing that they see is us.
I would say that's true.
Parroting him as God's appointed one, and those
are the questions I get too.
And I think that you have to be aware of that reality, and when you line that up with the rest of, even just his life. And I saw a funny, I think I sent you a thing from John Daly and or not John Stewart in the Daily Show. It was one of the Republican National Convention speakers talking about. He's a pastor. He's like, and Trump believes in marriage between one woman and one man, and the interviewer was like, "Wait a minute, just you mean the next young woman?" Like he just was going. It was funny, and just all these things. And so, I just think people can see the values over his lifetime that former President Trump has stood for, and they seem like
people are not going to like that comment.
It seems like what?
Well, you just quoted.
I'm sorry.
He said, I'm sorry.
I'm not saying you apologize.
Well, I think, a couple, just to that.
I wasn't shutting you down. Keep going.
No, my point is that people see the hypocrisy and they question it. And so whenever you hang out on the extreme, I think it sends a message.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
I think to that point, just to the one point, I think somebody can, I'm not saying this to validate, where he is today or anything. However, I will say some of the things that all of us have done at different times in our life, we would not want to be held in scope of that might be who we were.
I understand
and
that.
It doesn't necessarily mean who we are today. So I
get
think
that.
I think we have to a little bit, I understand, but I think that is kind of what I will say in politics. That is the narrative that is always spun. It doesn't matter. However you voted, we've seen that with Joe Biden on so many policies that have flipped since the 1990s. 20s. This is like what he thinks about marriage. All this, like it's all flipped.
Yes.
So we understand that in the political world, it's very unforgiving, right? It really is. I've kind of thought about this just because you asked me, you sent me something else like right after. What are your thoughts on this take? And the take was kind of, it's obvious this was God's divine hand, and he is God's, I want to say not divine man, but he is divinely chosen man for this season. And it's almost like this is a precursor and a guarantee to what's going to happen November 5th. And, maybe it will, maybe it won't, and I've seen a lot on there about God's protection. That's a tough one theologically, to wrestle with. I think one thing you said is kind of my sentiment. So people ask, do you think that was God? I say, we don't know. I think there has to be some level of honesty.
Yes.
And as much as I believe that there is divine intervention in our world, I believe in the supernatural in our interfacing with us. I've known so many people through the years, and probably people watching or listening to this, that many of them have had experiences where they've had car wrecks and other things, and then walked away with a few scratches when the car's totaled. This has happened, and they're like, I should not be alive. And here's what I would say from that: none of us can really definitively say there was an angel that actually kept you safe in that, even though as a lens of faith, all signs would kind of point to it seems like that, right? I do think that a lot of times we, in the middle of those moments, we come with a revelatory perspective through those situations where we feel like God was with us, and I think that can be a beautiful gift to even kind of recognize. I also don't want to downplay the fact that even we see in the New Testament, angels did divinely intervene. As Peter and Silas are in prison, or Peter and John in prison, Peter's there, and God, there are situations where angels do. So I don't want to discount. This is where kind of your point. I don't want to the whole opposite end that there's no way God does this. I'm like, well, that's not true. I think that from time to time God does that.
Oh, I definitely believe in divine protection.
Yeah, and so I think what we're asking, and a lot of people want to know, is this providence or is this coincidence? To me, that's the extreme. Is this providence or is this coincidence? And to that, I would say we just don't know.
Yeah.
And and I'm okay with living in a space of I don't know, because I don't know, right? I'm okay with that. I mean, you can look at it and go, well, there was just too much wind. Oh, he wasn't a very good shot. Oh, he was using a weapon that you probably wouldn't use if you were trying to get the most accurate shot from 200 yards. Oh, you could look at a myriad of things. It's a lot harder than people think to hit a really, But you could look at all of those aside. What concerns me the most about this conversation, this is the part I will weigh in, because I do not know, and I don't know that anybody knows. So it's all speculation. The part where I do have a thought, an opinion, is when the connection is automatically made to God preserved him, therefore God's hand must be on him. That connection makes me nervous more than anything else. There's and both could be true. Neither could be true. One could be true without the other being true. So I think that's where I would at least encourage, if you're a person of faith, I would encourage you to have a little bit of caution in just, I want to say, mimicking the rhetoric and the things that are just going around, and just the jumping to conclusions, because A happened, B must be true.
And I just think
that's, I think, this is where I think you start to get, I'll just wrap this. This is where I think you start to get challenges from people outside of faith. You're going, so God preserved him, so God's hand is on him, but God didn't preserve this other God, so God's hand wasn't with you know what I mean? This is where people start getting to you're drawing these massive conclusions because of one incident that we don't know if there was divine providence or not, and even if there was, doesn't necessarily infer that that means that God's hand is divinely on him, he's divinely chosen, he should be the next person. Like, no, democracy, the way at least our system works, is he gets chosen by the votes.
I also think that kind of like faith-flavored emotionalism is what exposes whether or not we're looking at things through a spiritual war lens or a culture war lens. Because even if I believe that it was divine protection, even if I just secretly believe that, if my mission is to reach and win and connect with all these people that don't believe, and I know at least a good half of them or more are turned off by what they view as the character of this man, and they look at the world differently, then why would I feel the need to blast and promote and post this narrative of, see, this is what God wants? And I just think that's where, for me, I go back to what's my mission, and then that mission will determine my method.
And I think the thing that could probably, I want to say, like, kind of just gets under my skin a little bit more than anything else is when I see other spiritual leaders and pastors doing that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this is almost, you're doing a disservice to Jesus when you do this. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump, but I'm just like, when you basically put a label on and go, this is what God wants. We don't know what God wants. I know what you want. That's clear by your, comment, your side.
Yeah.
I know what you want, but I don't know that we know what God wants.
Yeah.
In all these situations. And honestly, I think for the most part, God gives us what we want, whether it's good or bad. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of times God allows us as humans to make decisions, elections, choices, and when we have that result in you get what you wanted, even if the consequences of those things are not what you ultimately hope for. You know what I mean? Just in life. And so I think it's a really difficult connection and correlation to make.
Yeah.
That we go from, well, God preserved his life, therefore God's hand is on him, therefore he is the chosen one, therefore he is the one that, like, hey, he may win. Like I said, you ask me right now who's going to win. If Biden doesn't step down, I think he's going to win. I think Donald Trump's going to win. I think this is one of those things that's going to, between that and the debate, is going to tip a lot of people in his favor. I really do. And that's fine. That happens. God's in control. I don't care one way or the other. I mean, I do care at times, but I just it's not going to, but I want to be careful not to slap a label on, well, that was God's doing.
Yep.
Yeah.
That to me is a little sketch. I don't know. Again, I know some people have much stronger opinions about this, even on the right and conservative and all that, and that's fine. We can disagree, but I think maybe it's because of the seat I'm in. Maybe it's because of the role I play and being a pastor in a community, in a spiritual community. I want to be really cautious that I don't just continue to enforce that narrative that I can't theologically or practically back up.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good.
Yeah.
So,
any final thoughts?
I found this quote from Ronald Reagan's diary, actually, after he was shot. And he wrote this. I'm just going to read the quote directly from it. Ronald Reagan said, "Getting shot hurts. Still, my fear was growing because no matter how hard I tried to breathe, it seemed I was getting less and less air. I focused on that tiled ceiling and prayed, but I realized I couldn't ask for God's help while at the same time I felt hatred for the mixed-up young man who had shot me. Isn't that the meaning of the lost sheep? We're all God's children and therefore equally beloved by him. I began to pray for his soul, and they would find his way back to the fold." And he goes on, he goes, "Whatever happens now, I owe my life to God, and will try to serve him in every way that I can." And so clearly, for Ronald Reagan, that was that moment changed his perspective and his relationship with God. And so, I don't know if I'm trying to circle back around to clarify some of my earlier comments or whatever, but I think that no matter Donald Trump's journey and where he is on his scope with God or his relationship with God, I hope that he has one. And I hope that this is a moment that would draw him further into a relationship with Jesus. And that relationship would begin to reflect in his politics and what he says and how he leads and how he operates. And I think that if you see that begin to happen, man, I just think that would be awesome. And that'd be incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's I feel like it's been a month of just like epic moments to dissect as we lead up to. We knew that it would not be a boring stretch to the November elections, but man.
Isn't there still supposed to be a second debate?
Yeah.
I know originally. Is that still on?
Yeah, as far as we know.
When is that supposed to be?
I don't know.
Is it August?
I don't know. I really don't know.
I think so. Isn't August also supposed to be like when they announce
August 14th and 15th?
The Democrat National
is
Committee?
the DNC.
That's not what I was talking about. When they isn't there an August date where they announce the consequences of his indictment?
Although
or his conviction.
Although his attorneys have filed in that case because of the recent Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity for the New York case to be tossed. We already saw the Florida case, which many people felt there was the strongest evidence against him. That was tossed by the judge, and the Washington D.C. case is also mired in the same sort of legal challenges around immunity and things like that. So
I think all of that stuff's going to get very quiet.
Probably.
That's what I think is going to happen. For whatever reason. I don't know idea why. I have a feeling. That's just a gut feeling. I think all that stuff's going to die down. Yeah. With the election at hand and everything going on. I don't know. It's an interesting time.
Yeah, it really is.
I can't remember a time when it's been this, I don't know. You just, the events and having a candidate that there's so much pressure to step down and one that someone took a shot at. Like, this is just crazy.
And again, we rushed right past that. Unrelated to Saturday was an Iranian foiled attempt to assassinate former President Trump because of his assassination in 2020 on
Khamenei Hassari or whatever, the
Qasami.
Yeah,
the Iranian general. That they have vowed retribution towards Trump and his cabinet. And it's continued after he stepped away from the presidency.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. So much to talk about. Anyways, I don't know where this conversation found you, but let us know how you're processing. Let us know what you're thinking. Thanks for joining in. If you feel like this conversation was helpful, just get all the thoughts out and try to process all the different.
I think it's good to talk about it and to think about it. Even if we don't have any, there's no positions or sides, no this, just how does it hit you? How are you processing? So that's kind of what today was.
Yeah, because we talk about, we don't think it's helpful when pastors make big statements and promote and put their stamp on a candidate because it just compromises the reach of the people they're trying to reach. But we do think it's helpful to just have honest conversations on all sides. To elevate how we think about these things, how we talk about these things. So hopefully that's helpful and enriching to you, and you can share this with somebody that you think it might help. Email us in, let us know your thoughts. Also, email us in, let us know. We've talked about so many things over the last few months, and we've had so many fascinating guests, and ones we've even recorded that are still to come out. But let us know what's interesting to you right now, what you think would be fascinating for us to tackle and talk about. And until next week, we'll see you then.
Hey guys, it's Russ. Thanks so much for listening. We really believe if we can get around tables instead of behind screens, if we can talk to each other instead of at each other, we can make the world better. To help us do that, here are a few things you can do to help. First, if you haven't yet, leave a review on Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe on YouTube. This helps more than you know. Also, if you have been impacted by the community out of which this podcast comes, that's X Church. Maybe you're local or you've been touched by the messages and impact across the country, even the world. I want to encourage you to support this work. A powerful life principle is to invest in the people and places that invest in you. And so I want to invite you to do that right now by going to thex.church/give. You can give a one-time small gift, a sacrificial gift, or even become a recurring partner. Together, let's keep elevating the conversation, thinking higher, loving deeper, and making the world better. Cheers.